I think, there was no surprise that after they hiked consumption tax back in April, that a lot of people did their spending before then, so that there was going to be a hangover from that. But you would start to expect consumer spending to bounce back a little bit for this quarter through to September, but of course it hasn't, and it's been a terrible result, really.
So is that been the main driver behind this contraction, just the lack of consumer spending?
Yeah, I think so. And it's also doubly worrying when you consider that they also increased or persisted with their monetary stimulus. So the Kuroda's stimulatory monetary policy has persisted throughout this. Indeed, it's expanded, and at the same time you have this weakness. So I think the first consequence that we'll see is that the consumption tax hike to go from 8 to 10% in October next year is now almost certain that will be cancelled by Mr Abe.
So obviously any discussion around this topic is going to centre on Abenomics. This was a very substantial, restructuring of Japan's economy. In this transition, was it always going to be a bumpy road? I mean, is this something where economists would argue that you have to stick it out, or are these signs telling us that maybe we need to reevaluate whether this is working? Yeah,
I think the low-hanging fruit from Abenomics was always going to be picked easily, and the results would flow through pretty quickly. So that's the fiscal and monetary stimulus, which sort of drove down the yen, drove up stock prices, basically got the thing rolling. And there was always going to be a hiccup or a bump along the road, I think so. And so the problem is that the harder stuff, it takes a long time. So this is getting women into the workforce, deregulating the economy, basically allowing for more free hiring and firing of workers, and allow firms to reduce staffing levels where necessary. Now that's a sort of a long, hard road. Abe's attempted some of it through trade liberalisation, obviously signing the FTA with Australia and going forward on the TPP. There's been areas where he's sort of tackled structural reform, but it's going to take a long time.
So the snap response I've seen to this is some people have suggested that Abe will call an election sooner rather than later to seek a new mandate. Now that seems quite interesting to me, that he would take a tax hike to an election in which he'd also be taking an economy in recession. What's the reception within Japan been to this news?
Yeah, it is a bit counterintuitive. It's actually the postponement of a tax hike. So I guess he has that to sort of rally around to say, look, noting the economic circumstances, I'm not going to take the tax from 8 to 10%, which, is a good message to take to an election. But I think it's also about stability. I mean, he's had a couple of members of his cabinet picked off by the opposition, so they've had some sort of successes. Now he knows he wants to have as long a possible mandate to pick off these structural reform challenges, which take a lot more time. And his own personal standing hasn't suffered yet, and the opposition is very not united at all. So it does make some sense when you sort of strip it back. So he could go to the polls, get back in, suffer a loss of some seats, but still have a pretty strong platform and a longer time period to actually implement the harder stuff.
And has he done a good job of explaining to the public why there may be some pain along the way? I mean, is there some kind of acceptance of that?
Yeah, I think so. Look, he's made no secret of the need for structural reform, and his own standing, in spite of the kind of lacklustre economic conditions, remains pretty high.
In an Australian context where there's all this screaming about debt and deficit, if we had a Prime Minister running those kind of policies, they'd be turfed out quite quickly. I mean, they'd be screaming in the streets, but that's not the case in Japan.
True, he's got a very delicate tightrope to walk. I mean, if you delay the tax cycle, you delay tackling the debt problems that Japan has, but if you delay it, you also breathe life into an economy that's showing signs of being crushed to death. So I guess you sort of take your pick.
Is there any suggestion that he should be sticking this out and going for that 10% tax hike to try and turn the economy around?
Yeah, there would be advocates of that in Japan. Yeah, I suppose debt and deficit hawks, there would be some advocates of that would say it's better to do that. Okay,
and just finally, from an Australian perspective, I mean, what does this mean for Australia's industries? Is this bad news?
Oh, I don't think so. No, I mean, I think most of the commodities that they're buying from Australia, they will continue to buy. I mean, it's a setback. I guess it's got more political impact, but in that Abbott has forged quite a close relationship with Abe, and the two, we've had a coming together in a defence sense and an economic sense under Abe. But I don't think, unless the election really goes pear-shaped, anyone thinks Shinzo Abe is going anywhere soon. So, I don't think it's going to have major ramifications.
Fascinating. Rick Wallace, thanks very much.
No worries. Thank you.